Hello, mate.
Hello.
How are ya?
I'm really good. We always sound exactly the same when we start every episode.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm actually so hot. I don't know why I chose to wear a knit
Hot.
a knitted shirt on. I think it's like 30 degrees outside, but anyway, that's fine. I'll take the 30 degrees any day. It's nice to have just some sunny days. I've been lapping it up at the beach, which has been so good. But what I would say is just a bit of a humbug for me at the moment is that I am finding I've been having some real hectic headaches. I've been getting some tension headaches like behind the eyes and in between my eyebrows because me, being me, the queen of putting everything off, have basically needed to be wearing glasses pretty much for like the last 2 years. So I have problematic eyesight from distance, and it's mostly I notice it affects me when I'm driving, particularly at nighttime. And I lost my glasses. So I had a prescription. I lost my glasses, I reckon probably about 2 years ago. And for whatever stupid reason, it's just been one of those things that I've been like, oh, I'll deal with it. I'll get it sorted. And my eyes haven't been bad enough for it to be like, I can still see, but it's just a little fuzzy and I have to focus extra. So I've been putting it off to the point that I was at a conference recently. Actually, I spoke about the tourism conference that I did on a couple episodes ago. Anyway, I was at a conference and I was noticing how much I was struggling to read the screens in front of me, read the TVs. It was so blurry and I had to focus extra hard to see what was up on the screen. So I was like, I need to do something about this. Went and got my eyes tested again, got the prescription, got my glasses, which has been game-changing having glasses again. Like, why did it take me so long to do that? Even the other day I was doing Fox Footy boundary commentary and I was like, I can actually see the players' faces. Like I can actually see the numbers on their Guernseys. Like what the actual fuck took me so long to deal with that? But so it's great now that I've sorted it, but I'm finding, I think because my eyes are just adjusting to having glasses again, I've been getting headaches, which has not been the funnest, but also just a bit of a lesson in all of that for me that I just wish I need to be a little bit more like you. just an attacker. Like go and just sort shit out. Stop putting things off. Just do it. So yeah, bit of a life lesson there. And yeah, now I'm a glasses wearing girly.
This is just such a random story, but my mum had laser eye surgery, like, I don't know, a couple of years ago now. And something went wrong in the procedure and it like reversed it. So I think that she couldn't read.
As in she couldn't.
So she couldn't read before, like she needed glasses to read. And then she went and had this laser eye surgery and it flipped it. So now she can read, but she can't see distance.
That's so annoying.
Yeah. And so now she actually can't drive, or she doesn't drive at nighttime. She just finds it too challenging. She can't see shit.
Yeah. And I get that. I struggle so much at nighttime. There's something about the bright lights that really, it's almost like they feel like my eyeballs are burning. And it's, I think, just because I've had to focus extra hard and I get home and I'm extra tired because I've been like squinting the whole way and can't see shit. And yeah, so the driving, it's honestly amazing what glasses do. I'm like, wow, really just new lease on life. I can actually see. I can see things. But yeah, anywho, that's my little drama that I've been dealing with. What about you?
Welcome back. Yeah, gosh, I just feel like I'm drowning at the moment, which I hate that answer, but it's just true. I've got a bit of a backlog of clients at the moment from taking a little bit of time off, which means that my client load is just probably a little fuller than it should be, and maybe saying yes to a few too many things that like my schedule at the moment is just like, yeah, there's just no room to breathe. And my Mondays are always my hardest day of the week because I usually see between 5 and 6 clients on a Monday. So between like my first client's usually at 9 a.m. I work up until 4 p.m. and then at 4:15 on the dot, I have to get out the door to make it to the yoga studio to teach a double yoga class.
Oh, that's a day. That's a big Monday.
Yeah. And by the time I get home, it's usually about 10 to 8, 5 to 8. So it's just a massive day. And then to top it off on a Tuesday morning, I also teach. So I have to sort of wake up, not too early. It's not a super early class, but yeah, it's just a lot. But then I don't see clients on Tuesdays. So that's sort of my reprieve. But now these days it's a Tuesday right now. So, oh my God, I taught this morning. I left the yoga studio at like 9:15 and I had to leave my house by 9:30. So like 15 minutes to get home, have a shower, put my makeup on, pack my bag, have something to eat. Like absolutely unrealistic. So I left at like 9:40. I still ended up making it here on time. So that was lucky. But yeah, that's just unsustainable, right? And then we're going to finish here probably 5 p.m. I'm going to drive home in traffic and then I'm teaching a breathwork class tonight. And then I see 7 clients tomorrow.
Fuck.
7 clients on Thursday, and then Friday is like my opportunity. I've got a few meetings in the morning. Like it's like way too much. It's too much. Yeah, and then on top of that, I'm trying to alleviate the busyness by hiring a therapist, which I think I've spoken about already. By the time this episode goes live, I'm assuming that this is all kind of sorted and solved. But at the time of recording this, I'm just sort of in the process. I've done one formal interview and chatted to one other person as well. Yeah, and then had a meeting with my supervisor/mentor, and he was giving me a lot of guidance around this process and just different ways of thinking about, like building the business, which is so incredibly helpful. But then at the same time, now I have this whole list of things that I need to action that I actually don't have time to do. So the very thing that I'm trying to solve, which is the busyness, is preventing me from having the thinking space of actually like solving the problem. So that's frustrating because it just takes up mental load in the background of my mind where I'm like, I need a couple of hours just to sit and think and, plan essentially. But I don't have that at the moment. But I sort of sense that this is temporary. I mean, life is always ebbing and flowing, right? So I know that this is temporary. I'll come out the other side and everything will be fine, but I've just got to kind of weather the storm right now.
Well, it's funny. Well, it's actually probably not funny, but I would say I have definitely noticed a shift in the amount that I hear from you at the moment. I feel like I can sense your feeling of kind of being in the deep end and sort of sinking at the moment, because normally you're always the one reaching out to me and you're the one that's like getting me going and on the front foot and like, ushering me along. And I have hardly heard from you in like maybe a week. I'm like, normally Zoe's just like text me about random shit, or you'll be like, hey, have we done this? Or hey, have we done that? And I've noticed that that's like pulled back a bit. So I'm like, oh yeah, she's obviously real busy at the moment because she's gone a little bit quiet. And there's been a few little things like last night when we recorded this episode, we're like, we had like a pretty important thing that we had to have already organized, and we both kind of were like, oh shit, has that been done?
Well, yeah, I was teaching last night and you messaged me at, I don't know, maybe like 6:30, 7 o'clock.
Whereas you would have been on that like 3 days ago.
No doubt. And I was like, oh my God, shit, we haven't done this thing. Anyway, so I hate to also admit this, but because my Monday is so jam-packed, I don't have space to actually like plan the week and attend to the emails that I've received over the weekend or on the Friday. And anyway, so usually what I do is I get home from teaching at like 8 p.m. I'll quickly have something to eat. If Guy's home, he'll kindly make me something. But if I'm home by myself, I'll just have a fucking egg on toast or something sad. And then I usually get into bed, and that's like my work time. And, I'll do scheduling for our like podcast, social media stuff. I'll like attend, like write back to emails, like reschedule clients, and just like all that kind of admin stuff that most normal people would probably just spend an hour on a Monday morning kind of getting on top of. But yeah, when you messaged me during the class, I was like, fuck, now there's this other thing I have to add. So then, we've got this group chat going at like 9:45 last night, trying to figure out what to do. And like my creative juices at that time are pretty dismal.
They aren't flowing.
And I'm coming out with some rogue rogue suggestions, and I'm just watching myself like, oh, Zoe, go to bed.
Bless Amy, she was chucking a few good ones out there. And we're all a bit like,
Anyway,
we got there.
We got there in the end, and we always get there in the end. It's just the route that we get there. But yeah,
teamwork,
it's
honey.
Teamwork, and it's nice that I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's so nice to be able to collaborate together because when one, I feel like we can just intuitively tell when one person is kind of drowning.
Noticed it. I'm like, where's my friend gone? Miss you.
But anyway, with all of that being said, we have a really exciting episode today. We have a good friend of mine, Lucy Jarvis, coming on the pod. So I'll read her bio. So Lucy is a yoga teacher, retreat host, and business owner living on the Mornington Peninsula in Melbourne. Life has a way of unfolding differently than we imagine, something she has felt deeply through both joy and loss. Yoga and mindfulness have taught her the value of presence and acceptance, especially in moments of grief, like losing her brother to addiction or accepting a child-free life after IVF. Her business, Inner States, was born from her desire to create a sanctuary of tools and practices that support others on their own journeys, however unpredictable. Whether it's a yoga practice, a retreat, or a simple aromatherapy ritual, my hope is that Inner States, or her hope is that Inner States provides a bit of peace and presence when life feels uncertain.
I love that.
Yeah, so
I can't wait to talk to her.
Yeah, it's going to be a brilliant chat. We're going to talk all things loss and grief and how that shapes the way that Lucy chooses to live, and among other things. So, we hope you guys enjoy. It's important that we do give a trigger warning here. We will be discussing addiction, mental health, a lot of themes and topics related to grief, and also fertility and infertility. So if for any reason that's not where you're at the moment or you'd prefer to give this a miss, just feel free to skip it for today. But please come back when you do feel ready because it is such an important conversation. Before we start this episode, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the same land in which I've always had the privilege of calling home. I extend my deepest respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Before we kick off, Before we kick off, I'm gonna pass over to Mexi.
Yes, let's breathe. Again, I think it's a nice opportunity to just bring it down and back in for a minute. So if you're sorry. Hang on.
Maybe have some of the oil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me have a quick little whiff of this gorgeous gift that Lucy's just given us, aromatherapy roller.
Oh,
in heaven.
Yeah, very good.
Okay. Now it's time to breathe. So wherever you're joining us from, if you are comfortable, close the eyes and welcome in through the nose a big, deep breath. Let it all go. We have arrived.
We are here.
Lucy, thank you for this beautiful gift and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we, as our avid listeners now know, we start this podcast by asking our guests the question, what's keeping you rushing at the moment?
So keeping me rushing at the moment is leading into what I like to call the pointy end of the year, where everything kind of starts to get a little bit busier, a little bit faster. And I guess for me, I have a business that is both service-based and product-based. So it kind of all ramps up at the same time, and it's really easy to get caught up in that cycle and feel like I need to do it all before Christmas, which is really not the case, but it's definitely something that I'm aware of.
No, I mean, not only is Christmas so hectic personally, but to your point, when you have a business that has literally the most perfect Christmas presents to be purchased, I can only imagine what November, December's like.
Yeah, it's really nice. Like I love this time of the year because I feel like lots of people do buy really beautiful, mindful gifts from me for Christmas. So it's so nice, but it's also a time where I'm like, awesome, people are out and about a little bit. Let's do workshops and let's do fun things with yoga and teaching. And then, you just add the social aspect to that. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I've massively overcommitted. What have I done?
And don't you think it just makes time go so quickly as well? Like even just looking at the calendar and thinking, I mean, at the time of recording this, Christmas really is not that far away now. Really, it's only within the next couple of weeks. It's going to be Christmas Day, which is just absolutely insane. But I want to maybe get you to share perhaps for our listeners. Like we've obviously had the opportunity, and Zoe knows you really well. I met you through our launch, and thank you so much for coming to that event that we had a few months back now, which was such a special day, and we're so grateful.
Such a special day.
So grateful that you shared that with us. But if you were to summarize who you are and what you do in a sentence, who is Lucy Jarvis?
Oh, that's a tough one. I feel
You
like
can have more than one sentence, by the way. That was a bit stingy. You
Yeah.
can a couple.
Yeah.
one sentence, sum you up. I am a woman who just loves to be really connected to those around me and really connected to my authentic self. I think it's really important in this world that we live in to act from your heart and to kind of be yourself, like in a world that wants to show up as something that's really set often by, society and how we think we should be. I feel like being authentic to me is really, really important, and knowing that you don't always have to do things the way that maybe you thought you did or the way that you expect, like people expect you to. So I guess my life has followed a bit of a different path than what I thought it would. And I studied after school, I studied fashion, and then I landed in a fashion career for like 11 or 12 years, which was really, really good. I kind of like, hit all those levels. I was really driven, and I got to being a brand manager for quite a big brand, and it was awesome, but I was just fundamentally pretty unhappy, and I kind of kept having the same set of scenarios or the same kind of type bosses playing out that I was just like, is this really what I'm meant to be doing? And I think through that, I really learned to like listen to that little internal voice that was like, maybe you should do something else or like follow that. And yeah, I guess that for me, it's just really important to show up as who you are, not who others think that you should be.
You know what I love about that response? That you didn't lead with what you do for a living.
Oh.
You actually led with the kind of person that you are and what you really value. And that is really rare, actually, to ask someone who they are and to have a response that was so beautiful like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess like maybe by listening to those like little nuggets of like wisdom from my intuition, it was kind of what led me to do what I want now. But for a long time, I kind of always knew I wanted to have my own business, and I knew what I love, but I really didn't understand like where that was taking me or how it looked. And then it was just through like a series of circumstances in like my personal life that I feel like really carved out the way that my business is now, which is, I guess it's pretty unique. But it's something that really, really lights me up. And so I'm really grateful that that's where I've landed now. Yeah, it feels right. And I think you kind of always know that in your heart when you're like on the right track.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time we kind of just either choose to ignore that or choose to push it aside because it feels scary, or, you should be doing something else because you've done all the work to be doing that other thing.
Yeah. There's a therapeutic term called the tyranny of the should, which is like this idea that your identity is built upon what you should be doing. But I've heard other people describe it as whenever you notice that word should showing up in your inner vocabulary or external vocabulary, it's an opportunity to ask yourself, whose voice is that? Because whenever we believe we should be doing something, it's typically because someone has imposed that on us or told us that that's what needs to be done.
What did you say it's called? The tyranny?
The tyranny of the should. I can't remember whose like theory it is, but it's
wow.
That's
such a great way to check yourself, I think, because so often even just hearing you say that, I've had a memory of me saying, oh, I should do that. I should. And I'm like, I think, well, now that you've said that, I'll probably be a lot more conscious of it, and such a great way to pull yourself up.
Yeah, it's a nice little way to check in with with yourself and be like, okay, who's saying that you should? Like, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've just already in such a short amount of time mentioned so many important things that we'd love to talk to you about today. Firstly, just a little bit of context. So Luce and I are really good friends. We met, I don't know how many years ago now.
I feel like it would have been just after I became a yoga teacher. So we were working at the same studio together, maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, so we met through the yoga industry because we're both yoga teachers, but now we both live on the Mornington Peninsula, which we didn't meet on the peninsula. That's sort of more coincidental that we ended up teaching at the same studio on the peninsula, and then now we've kind of created our own little friendship group down there, which is so nice. We were just laughing before we started recording about our husbands, hanging out on their own time and causing absolute ruckus, mind you. Lucy sent me a photo a little while ago while I was away of a photo of Josh wearing Guy's giant koala outfit. It's like a giant inflatable koala outfit. Like,
the dancing thing? You showed me that.
I feel like Josh and Guy are really tarred with the same brush.
Yeah.
And so they're like, yes, they're quite a dynamic duo together.
They are a force to be reckoned with. Anyway, Lucy and I just sit back and we just let them run their race. But one of the main reasons why, there are many reasons why we were so excited to sit down with you and have this chat today, is just because how aligned you are with what we're talking about here on Rushing Slowly. You're a business owner, you're a hustler in many ways, but in the same breath, you're also really committed to a slow pace of life.
Yeah.
But also I feel like you and I have connected quite personally over our shared experiences of grief,
100%.
which is also something that Megsy and I have connected on as well. So, I'd really love to kind of understand how grief informs the way that you choose to live.
So I grew up in Melbourne, just in like probably the average Aussie family. Like I have really beautiful parents, really 2 beautiful brothers. And I was just like, the one sister. So I was a bit of a tomboy growing up as well. And I have an older brother and a younger brother, and we had like a really beautiful normal life. And then as I got to be a young adult around the age of I was trying to work it out actually today, probably about 18, my youngest brother became an addict, and he was only really young. So he's 4 years younger than me. So they'd started kind of dabbling at school from a really young age. And it was like, a nice school in the eastern suburbs, but he'd always kind of struggled, I guess, with his self-identity. And so my parents were very supportive. And for probably from the age of about 18 to 23, he was in and out of rehab. And I guess because I was so close with him, I was his support person. So there was a lot of dealing with that. And my husband and I would go and save him from rehab. He'd run away from rehab and we'd go and pick him up and drop him back off, or, we'd try and monitor him when he got out of rehab. And I think he did about 3 or 4 stints. And then he got to the point where he had all but been cut off from our family. I feel like my parents did a really, really good job of handling it. Like they got to the point where they were like, okay, we're not enabling this behavior anymore. If this is what you want to do, you're kind of out on your own. And so he did get to the point where he was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And he pulled up his socks and did a whole stint. And I remember actually it was probably my first Christmas where I was like, oh, wow, this must be what it's like for people who don't have like a normal family situation. I think he was allowed to visit home when he was in rehab over Chrissy. And so we went and picked him up and had Christmas lunch at home. And I think that was the time that he actually made it through the whole program. And so he then went up and lived with my auntie in northern New South Wales, which is where my family's from. And so he was pretty happy and he was clean for a few years. And then the first time he came back to Melbourne, he would have been, I think I was about 23 or 24. And he would have probably been around 20 or 21. And he'd been clean for a few years. And he was coming home and seeing some friends, and then we're all spending the weekend together. And it was like a big deal because it was the first time he came back, and we were really nervous because we knew that there'd be lots of triggers and stuff. And we weren't seeing him on the Friday night. And my husband and I, we were just together at the time. We'd gone home to stay at my folks' place, and we were going to see him on that Saturday. And it was really early, like maybe 6:30 in the morning, and my bedroom was just like near our front door, and I could see that people had come to the front door, and I was like, that's really weird. And I was like, Mum, there's somebody at the door. And so I went and opened the door, and there were 2 police standing there, and they were like, your parents home? We just need to speak to them about I believe it's your brother. And so I called my mum. And so my mum was actually an intensive care nurse for my whole life. So she had always worked in hospitals. And so went to the door, and essentially what had happened was my brother had gone out, and he was a heroin addict towards the end, and he had had a really bad hit, and he was at a friend's house, and his friend had waited kind of all night to call the ambulance, eventually called the ambulance. And so Pat was in intensive care. And so that was probably the first time that I was really like, oh my gosh, my life is going to like hit a really different trajectory to what I actually thought. And so he was like a miracle though that he pulled through. He was in intensive care for 2 weeks, and the doctors were like, it will be a miracle if he pulls through. Like he was on breathing machines and everything. But he did manage to come good. So he was in hospital all up for about 4 weeks, and then he had to have dialysis for about 3 months. And so, yeah, he couldn't remember what happened or anything, but I feel like that was the first time that my nervous system was like, oh my gosh, like what is this? Like
And
after all the stuff that happened with rehab, that was challenging, but that was like
whole new level.
a whole new level.
Sorry to interrupt, but how long had he been sober for? Just remind me.
He'd been sober for about 2 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Fuck.
And so he'd been working. He was really like on the straight and narrow. Like he was really, really good. He'd put on weight. He was happy. He had a good boss, and he was living with my auntie, who was like my second mum up in northern New South Wales. So then all the family like obviously flew down because we thought he was going to pass, but he miraculously pulled through.
Wow.
And so mum and dad got him back up on his feet. And then once he came off dialysis, he went back up to northern New South Wales to live with my auntie. And that was about the time that I started to get into yoga, because I was just like, I think it was actually when like Bikram was at its height. And I was like,
we've all been there.
Sweating it
yeah,
out.
something to sweat it out.
Yeah.
And it kind of was like that thing that I needed to probably get on my yoga mat. And I'll just never forget, like in Shavasana, just not being able to like having no body awareness to be able to like lay still or like let your body soften towards the earth, because you were just like rigid and in this weird position. And so that was the first time I kind of started to realize that, okay, if this is life, like I need some coping skills to deal with this, because I don't feel like I'm coping. And so then fast forward 10 years, he got clean, he got married, he had babies, I did my yoga teacher training about 10 years after that. So it took me a really long time to kind of like work out that that's what I wanted to do. And so in COVID, he just broke up with his wife just before COVID started. And so we decided, come back to Melbourne, like you can get on your own 2 feet. He was 31. So he has beautiful children and like, was pretty driven and in a really, really good state of mind. But we also knew that like he was living in a place where he didn't have any friends. His ex had moved away with the kids, and he really needed to get out of there. So we thought coming back to Melbourne would be the best thing. And then he was doing really, really well. Like he was actually great. It was so nice. And I'm so like grateful to have that time with him, the 6 months, like when he came back down, because it was the first time that we'd all been together for like a really long time.
Wow.
Like up until that point, my family had all kind of been in different points. So that was really, really special. But unfortunately, none of us knew that in COVID with stage 4 lockdowns, he'd started to use again, and none of us knew. And so my poor parents woke up one Saturday morning and he'd accidentally overdosed in his room. And so it was just like literally like just the worst case scenario that you could think of. We were meant to be in stage 4 lockdown, and my brother had just passed away, and he had beautiful babies, and none of us even knew that, he was using again. But he just felt, I think, so isolated, and like he was never going to be able to get back to his kids. And he was so shameful of what had happened to him in the past that he just didn't want to really deal with. I think he couldn't see the way forward, and he didn't have that, self-love and that compassion for himself to see that we would help him through it. So unfortunately, it ended in the worst possible way that you can think. And then I'd just become a yoga teacher. So I'd been teaching for about 6 months, and I just started inner states, and he was actually really helping me with inner states at the time because he was a concreter, and I was developing something so trivial, but I'll never forget these little incense holders that were made out of concrete. And I still have 6 of them at home, and they're like some of my most prized possessions because I just use them all the time. And I feel like I always take one to the market with me because it's like a good luck charm and stuff. But yeah, it was just horrendous. And I think with grief, we were really unlucky that we'd lost Josh's dad. He passed away about 6 months after we got married.
Josh is Lucy's husband.
Yes, Josh is my beautiful husband, and we've been together for 16 years now. So we've been married. Actually, it was our wedding anniversary last week. So we've been married for 9 years. So we've been together for a really long time, and we've been through a lot together in our relationship. So just after we got married, Josh's dad passed away like quite quickly. Like he'd had cancer for a little while, but was meant to be in remission. And then once we got back from our wedding trip, we got married in Bali. He kind of went downhill, and then he ended up passing away within a few months. So that was probably my first experience with grief. And that was obviously horrendous. And we were all really close. And I knew from that point on what it meant for Josh to obviously have all those milestones like Father's Day, and like Christmas is never really the same. But I feel like you never really know how much it hits you until you like lose somebody in your family, because that just is a whole different thing. And so I feel like we were just coming out of lockdown about 2 weeks after Pat passed away. Like he had like waited just until the tail end. Gosh. And so we got through like the hard part, and then unfortunately that happened, and it was just heartbreaking for our family, for, his ex-wife and for his kids and the whole thing. And we had to do the 12 people at the funeral, and
oh my God.
Yeah, with masks and all the things. And it was just horrible. And then it felt like the next day we were like coming out of lockdown, and I needed to kind of like process that all and work out how I was going to go back to work. I was about to launch Inner States like 2 weeks after, so I kind of like pushed it back a little bit. But launching my business and doing all these things that I felt like we'd been in this like little like hibernation station, and then everything was happening at once, and I was trying to like work out and grapple with how to even just show up as a human. So it was really, really hard, but I feel like, those stages teach you the most about yourself and about the tools that you have and about regulation and, just showing up. I guess I'll never forget how many people showed up for me at that point, and just how people showed their kindness and their love and their understanding just in really different ways, but really profound ways. And I feel like the one thing about grief is it actually shows you how to be a bit of a better human, because you can kind of like connect with people, and it's like this horrible club that nobody wants to be in. But once you're in it, you like know how that feels. So you're just able to be like a better human because of it, I suppose.
My goodness. Firstly, Pat, like you just hold so much like love and compassion for somebody like Pat, who's, obviously he just had things going on in his mind, and like you said, just so much love for him. But thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through so much in such a short space of time as well. But I think you're so right. Like that grief really is one of our greatest compasses, like you'd give anything in your whole soul to have your people back and have your loved ones with you. But it's certainly such a guiding light, and no doubt has been a big part of what's led you to be the human that you are today, and the lessons that you learn, and how you want to treat people, and how you want to love people, and what you want to hold on to. Like you just gain such a different perspective on life when you've experienced such deep loss like that.
100%. And I feel like life does just move so quickly. And I know we were just speaking about before the fact that my beautiful little dog passed away when we were in Bali really unexpectedly a few weeks ago. And it's really funny, I'm so woo. So I always say that like the energetic of grief, it's like as soon as you've like been acquainted with that, like when it hits again, you just know it. Like it's it's such a profound frequency that like it kind of just comes back and it like cracks you open again. It's like almost like it plants a little seed in you. And yeah, I guess you've just got to take the good from that and learn from it and learn not to push it down, because I feel like we live in this society where it's like it's not really you know, you just have to keep going about your days. You know, you've got work and you've got commitments and you've got a social life, and like everyone's like, you know, make sure you take time to process, but it's like, what does that really look like?
Yeah,
like
how?
how when life is busy, it's really, really hard. And it's actually something that I've been really aware of with Lola, to like make sure I'm not just like shoving it down and moving on, because life is busy. And I think with Pat, I did that. And as a family, we knew that we had this point where we'd always been really open about like Pat's addiction and, you know, in a very respectful way with him, but he was open about it. And so when he passed, we knew that we had this opportunity to either like just not say anything and kind of brush it under the rug, or to be really honest and say, this is what's happened to our family. This is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And if we can talk about this and be open about it, maybe that will help somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that has always been I guess the way I like to show up. I'm a pretty honest person, bit of a straight shooter. So I think it's, these harder conversations are really important to have.
I often like this idea of like grief. You have some exposure to grief, and then whenever you're exposed to any kind of situation that elicits that feeling, it like reopens all the old wounds. I often like the feeling I get is that I have this like giant like cauldron or pot of like stirring grief, and most of the time the lid is closed, but something will happen no matter how big or small, and if it like cracks a little bit of the lid open, like the whole lid will come off.
100%.
So like rather than just reacting to something that's potentially a little bit sad or small, it's like I access that like profound feeling of grief that I never had until I experienced death in the family. Like, you know, it's like it's so hard to relate to what that feeling is like unless you've gone through it.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I don't know if this is like an okay question to ask, but when you say accidental overdose, what does that mean?
So what happened was he hadn't actually meant to it's just, I guess at the time, one of the things that was, because when it happened, we didn't even know that he was using again.
Yeah.
So it was like, did he try and commit suicide?
Yeah.
Like, what was this? But it was just an accidental overdose at the time. Because it was COVID, the police said that the I guess the substances that were out there were very, very bad quality. That it was something.
It wasn't the quantity, it was the quality.
The quantity, it was the quality. So it was like the street. I guess the drugs were really dirty that were out there and that he'd got access to. So it was like not a huge amount that he'd done, but it was just unfortunately really bad quality. And I guess, isn't it funny? That's like something that you don't even think of, but unfortunately addicts, like they put their health on the line at any point because they just hope that, you know, what they're taking is what they think it is. And often it's not. So.
And were you ever able to trace back any further information for how long he had been using for without you knowing it? Or
so we think that he had been using for a few months. There were little telltale signs. And isn't it funny, like at COVID, we weren't being like super, super strict, but I guess like anybody else, we were following the rules and we were outside of his 5K. So there were signs that he wasn't doing well, but we were very much like, it's against the rules. We can't see you. Yeah. And then looking back, like we were just like, he was clearly really struggling. Yeah. And he definitely was seeing some friends. And actually that morning he had like, which just breaks my heart to think about this, but he'd organized to go fishing with some mates and they'd rocked up and he didn't show up and they were trying to contact him and like, where is he? And he'd actually made the pledge with a friend that night before he had confided in somebody for the first time that was kind of like on the outer to the group that he was really struggling, but he knew what he needed to do and he needed to pull his shit together and that was going to be the last time. And so, it was like we didn't know, but there were clear signs then when we look back. It's like, you know, once the veil has been lifted at almost the whole picture becomes a little bit clearer.
Which must be such a hard thing to go through, because it's like that hindsight thing. But when it's like somebody's life, that's almost like another form of grief, because you're like, had COVID not been a thing,
Yeah.
had we have been able to be closer, there's all these other things that you go through on top of the fact that you're already dealing with losing one of your closest, your family, your brother. It's also then like, fuck, you're having all these reflective moments. Like, was there a sign there? Could I have noticed it in this moment or that moment? And that must be so hard as well.
Yeah, it was so hard. When the police actually came to mum and dad's house that first night that it happened, actually it was the morning, they were like, do you know what? We never see this, like not with people, because we were like trying to work out what had gone on. And they were like, we're seeing this often at the moment, like with COVID, like people who feel like they've been backed into a corner and have been really good, like with their mental health and with their addiction in check for a long time. It's definitely sent people over the edge. And so I feel like when this stuff happens in life, you kind of, I guess, have the opportunity to like be the victim and to blame all the things, or and like COVID was really hard. Like there was definitely a point in time where I was so angry about COVID. Like I'd listened to all the rules and we'd done all the things, and then this was how it was playing out. Like, how was anything worth this happening? But at the end of the day, blaming something and, when it doesn't change the outcome, it's not actually going to make any difference. So yeah, we just chose to kind of like remember him for the amazing person that he was. And I think that there's a common, for a lot of people that I've spoken about who have had addicts in their family, or they've lost people to suicide and addiction, Pat follows the same kind of theme in their personality. And that was that he was like somebody who was really able to make other people feel good, but he was not really able to allow other people in to that point where, they'd be able to kind of let him feel good and safe. Like he always, kind of held his demons close to his chest, but like showed up for everyone else. And so, yeah, I think that it's really hard for men in this day and age. And like, I really notice that like whenever I'm vocal about it, and I'm sometimes vocal about it on my business page, that I always get DMs and I always get people reaching out. And honestly, I feel like 8 times out of 10, it's like, oh, my brother or my uncle or my dad or, my ex, they really struggled with this, and that was their personality too. Like they really just, can't put themselves first and say that I need help. It's really hard. It's much more challenging for them. So I feel like it's a really important conversation to have.
It's so important. Gosh, it's like, it makes you just feel so like, you're talking about grief and, having experienced my own version of grief too, like just hearing your story, I feel like just this ache in my chest, in my belly. But 100%, like you said, having this conversation, particularly with men, and just making not light, but just making it okay to not be okay. And even having
I loved what Guy
I was just
said
about
in his
to say
episode,
that.
which is making it a habit of talking about how you feel, so it's not weird to talk about how you feel.
You just literally took that out of my brain. I'm so glad you said that, because and especially coming from a guy, hearing Guy say that, because it is, we hear way too many stories, particularly about men struggling, suffering in silence.
Definitely. And it's funny, like we all do it, right? It's like, how are you? And you could be having the shittest day and
good,
you're
thanks.
like, I'm great. I'm dying on the inside here and I just need to speak. But we're just like autopilot. And it's really hard for people to voice how they really feel. And I don't know what needs to change in our society
I was about to ask you, what do you think we can do? Is there anything that we can do to kind of make it easier, or like help, or like how do we have those conversations? Like how do you approach them?
Yeah, I feel like having the conversation is like a really good starting place. And I guess that for me, just having the conversation about like, making sure that we have tools in our toolkit to like turn to is really important. Like, and I think community, I was thinking about my values the other day, and it's like, community and being honest and being authentic. And I guess that's why I teach yoga, because I think if you can just help one person a tiny bit,
Yeah.
like that makes all the difference to that human for however long. Like,
Yeah. My next question was going to be this experience of losing Pat. Like, how does that actually inform the way that you now choose to live your life, which I know is very intentionally and consciously?
Yeah. So I feel like before Pat passed away, I had always been the kind of one in our group of friends that was like, I never really bowed down to peer pressure heaps. Like if I wanted to do something, I would kind of do it. And if it was different to everyone else, that was fine. Like I was happy to be kind of like on the outer a little bit. And I guess as I got older, I kind of learned to listen to that like gut intuition and have always had pretty good boundaries with things. And so I think just before Pat passed, having the courage to finally step away from my career, which, you know, you think you're going to be happy when you get to the point where you've like got all those things on paper where you're earning X amount. And then I got to that point and I was miserable, so miserable. Like didn't have time to do the yoga, to do all the things that you wanted, could afford like nice things, but like also just felt a little bit dead on the inside. And so it was actually like the universe, I feel like handing me like a little like, come on, do what you want. I got made redundant and I was like,
what a treat.
The death of the ego, but like finally was like, it was great. It was a few weeks before I ended my YTT, my yoga teacher training. And I'm really lucky that I've got a super supportive husband. So we were going to Bali for a few weeks and we, you know, took the time to have the conversation around like what I wanted. And I've been in a few really great roles with big brands like earlier in my career, and then had kind of jumped around with some roles and not really found my thing and was struggling a little bit, but had like the title that I wanted. And so I think that at that point I was like, I don't know whether I want to do this. Like I really feel like I want to move more into like yoga and that area. And I guess I got to the point where I knew I could do some consulting and knew I could do some like social media management, and like I had lots of skills that I could do which weren't just like didn't lend themselves to being like a 9 to 5. And it was funny. I feel like at that point the universe always goes, okay, we're going to give you like the role that you've always said that you really, really want. So we were away and one of my old bosses who I loved reached out to me with a really great buying position. And I think like when you work in fashion and you've worked in wholesale, like being a buyer is the most attractive thing. Like it feels incredible, and it was working with a really, really great brand. And I just sat with it and just went, do you know what? I've like had this before and I keep saying yes to this, but I don't know why, but I feel like I just need to say no and stick to my guns and like do the thing that is going to make no sense to anyone else, including my parents, who are like, what do you mean? What are you doing? Like you don't get maternity pay, you don't get sick leave, you don't do all of that. You're like giving it all away for what? And at the time I had like one yoga class a week. I was like, it's all right. I got a foot in the door. I feel like I can back myself. I know what to do. And an incredibly supportive husband who I'm so grateful for. So we just decided that, do you know what? Let's give it 6 months. And if in that time I am unhappy and it's not working, I can always go back to doing the thing.
Yeah.
And so
you can always go back, right?
Yeah.
That's such an important thing to note.
100%. And so that happened. And then about 3 months into that, COVID happened. And so I was like,
okay, that doesn't count.
Maybe you can. Maybe you can't go back.
Totally. I was just about, I've been working like part-time, doing some like consulting. Was teaching quite a bit, but was just about to start full-time hours the following week, like after COVID. And so it was like, oh gosh, what have I done? But it was okay. I was really lucky I did get JobKeeper. So that kind of gave me a bit of a buffer. And then I'm the kind of person, I've always had a big thirst to kind of like want to work. So I was working in a beautiful little health food store. So that was also able to stay open. So I would take any hours that I could do to just get out of the house. And I think that time and space was what kind of finally gave me the time to really think about like what I wanted to be doing and how that could look. And I was like, okay, I knew that I'd always wanted to have some kind of product-based business. So maybe now is the time to like really start to look and flesh out like how that feels and how that might look. And so that's when I started to develop Inner States.
And this is during COVID.
Yeah. So this was during COVID, just before I passed. And so I feel like I was kind of building the foundation for it then. And then when he passed, it was almost like in some ways it would have been easier to run for the hills and just like go back and go back to like the old.
Familiar.
Totally. Yeah. But I was really lucky actually. I got into some Kundalini yoga. I just met a beautiful teacher and I feel like I really just probably for 6 months like I'm a bit of an introvert as it is, but like I took a big pause on anything social and really decided, do you know what? Well, if he doesn't get to live out his life, like I'm going to live out the life that I want to and not settle. And so I just kind of like it gave me permission to like pause, kind of like re-solidify what was really important and then to just like go after it. And I guess for me, when I really have moments of doubt, I come back to that. Like not everyone gets to do the thing and doing the thing that you want, even if it is your business, it doesn't mean that it's easy. But I feel like, I can go home I can have a really shitty day and teach a yoga class and have a few people come up to me afterwards and I know that they've got something out of it. And for me, I'll just like, that's the best feeling in the world.
I resonate with that so much. And I think, again, that's like one of the biggest lessons I've personally, I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but learning that, it is a little cliche, but life is short and that, this person doesn't get to live and we don't even know how long we get to. So if you're gonna, if we've got this opportunity, let's fucking go. Like, I'm not, I don't want to waste time. And when you know how hard it is to be on the other side, when you see somebody, especially your beautiful brother Pat, so young. But going back to Inner States and the building of, was that something that kind of helped you get through
100%.
the grief? Like just channeling your creativity and your thoughts into this exciting project?
Yeah, I've been so lucky. I feel like it's been like over the last, and it's just been 4 years now since he passed away. So I feel like over the last 4 years, it's just given me such a beautiful outlet to like channel my passions and my creativity and just my love into and to just build it. And at times there has been moments where I've been like, what am I doing? This is so hard. Like it's so hard building a product-based business, like from, your own investment and not getting investors. And I make everything by myself.
Wow.
And so it's all Australian made, all handmade. And I've kind of at times been like, what am I doing? This is so hard. And in those moments of doubt, I'm so lucky that Josh is like, no, I'm really proud of you. Like, it's great. And like we were saying before, I'm almost 40 and we only just bought our first house. And like when we were going through that, it's like, you think of those levels and you think of how society wants you to show up and in moments of doubt, like, I 100% was like, my God, this is not even something to be proud of. Like I'm almost 40 and only just buying our first house. And at those times when you like, you're getting your finances in order. And I remember saying to Josh, this is just, I'm holding us back. Like if I was working in corporate, like we could be buying a beautiful house. Like we wouldn't be so stretched with like our budget and stuff. And he's like, and you'd be fucking miserable. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. You'd be miserable. And he's so right because he knows me. And I, it's just, I don't really enjoy working for other people and being told what to do. And I think when you're really creative and like have a big heart and you want to do things your own way, it is kind of challenging to fit into a box and to do things a certain way because they're the way, like I'm a real questioner. It's like, this should be done this way. Why? Because it should, because that's the way we've always done it. And I'm like,
next.
So I always struggled with that. And hilariously, about 2 years ago, Josh and I worked together for a little bit and he was just like, he was my boss.
Oh, this is New Balance. Yeah.
And he was just like, because he's just so good at getting stuff done and like just we're so different. So that was really fascinating for him.
Where was he your boss at?
He was my boss at New Balance.
Oh, okay. So when you, wow. So you like fully worked like at,
because
I just cannot picture that. I knew you worked together. I didn't know that he was your boss.
Yeah, he was my boss.
That is classic.
I'd worked for a few big sporting brands and in footwear. And so he works in footwear now. And so, we went back and it was just as kind of like I was managing studios, and then that was becoming a bit tricky because COVID was still a thing, and I was doing interstates on the side. And then I remember Josh and I had been away for a few weeks, and we got back and my studio manager job fell through, and I was like, ugh. And he was like, his employee left, and it was like, I was like, maybe I could come and work for you for a little bit. And it was like, went from being a joke to he was like, I'm desperate. Can you come and work for me? Because I don't have anyone else. And because I'd worked in that industry for so long, we also knew that I could just like hit the ground running. So it was like, cool, this will be good. And then 9 months later was still there, and we needed to make the decision that like, it was actually fine, but it was like, we don't want to work together. Like this is not a thing. Let's
But signs of a good relationship that you were even able to survive 9 months of that. That's like, you guys have got a good thing going on.
I feel like the hardest part with that was, and we still, because we're so passionate about our jobs, like we both love like a very passionate, I guess, creative people, and we've both always been in sales. So we love a chat. I guess the hardest thing was to kind of like work and then not take work home. So we used to obviously go together to and from work unless we had different meetings and stuff on. But it was like once we hopped in the car, like no more talking about work. And that was so incredibly challenging. And we'd just be like, I just need to ask you like one question. And I'd be like, no, I'm done for the day. Or
that's so interesting, because so much of like just reflecting on having Guy on here, that was something that was like so different about your, like you might not see each other for a couple of days, and you would have so many things to catch up about. And a lot of it would be, a lot of what we do is work, and that's what you talk about. So that would be such a challenge.
It's like the opposite.
So challenging.
Like shut up, no talking.
Yeah.
Oh
and
my gosh.
it was really great. Like, cause we're both good at what we do. And I know that was hard to leave. Like, but it was funny because I had more experience than him and had been more senior than him. And then I kind of like, the roles were reversed, and I was like working underneath him, which was totally fine. But it was just like, it served a means to an end. And then it was like, okay, this is time to move on.
I just had this vision of him being like so desperate, please do it. In that moment, I would have been like, beg me. Get on your knees and beg.
It was very funny. And I used to be like, now I'm the favorite at work. They thought you were good, and now they love me more. And he'd be like, eye rolling, like, oh, what have I created?
Just knowing you guys as a couple, I just love everything about this so much.
It's so funny. Well, I guess whenever like, Josh's work comes up or my work comes up, like we're both just, very passionate people, like love all the things. So yeah.
Can we go back to inner states?
Yes.
I want to ask I'm so fascinated about the products. You make them all, you send them all out yourself. You do it all.
Yep. So for a few years, so this is for the last year, it's been the first year that I've been working fully in the business. So that was about 2 years ago that Josh and I worked together for 9 months. And then I worked for another beautiful friend in fashion at an agency for about almost another year. And towards the end of that year was really, really challenging. And towards the end of that year, I was like, oh my God, I just do not feel like I'm doing anything well. Like I'm not being a good yoga teacher because I'm just like, it's the, thing that I need to do, but I haven't really like embodied that practice, or I don't really feel like I have enough time to be fully present with it. Inner states is just like a rush, like I'm trying to get stuff out or like quickly batch stuff up on the weekends, or I don't have stock available. I'm not feeling inspired. And then for my job, I was like putting that first because obviously you're getting paid for your job, but I also felt like I wasn't really showing up in the full capacity that I wanted to either. So I think at the end of last year, I ran a retreat and I got back and I was just like, I just can't keep doing this. And it's like, I think if you're a bit of a woo person or like really believe in signs.
We always joke that we've got like a woo-o-meter and that Lucy is like always on the spectrum between woo and full woo.
And Josh is like, never go full woo. Like he tries to like pull me back into line. Yeah. So I'm allowed a little bit of woo, but he's like my grounded, like level-headedness of like bringing me back down to earth. And so I think, after my retreat, I came back and tried to get back into it all. And it was like similar time of year to this where it was like leading into the Christmas period. And I was just like, I can't do this. And something's got to give. I've got to give up something. And we hadn't really planned financially to get rid of my job, but it made the most sense to give that up. And I felt like I was at that point where I was kind of being given some gentle nudges by the universe that like, if you don't make this decision, we're going to make the decision for you and do something that's going to like take something away or it won't. So I feel like I've been there before where you kind of like wait and then, you know, you get made redundant or something bad happens and you're not really prepared. So I felt like I just needed to jump off the cliff and make the decision. So yeah, I decided to go fully into inner states. So and I bought separate to that, I'd had kind of like the yoga teaching and services separately, and Inner States was just like the umbrella of products. So I got into that, I guess, because I'd always loved essential oils and always loved incense and ritual. And then in COVID, I just lent on those things so much. And I'm also a really bad sleeper. And so I think for me, I always needed things to help aid me like wind down or go to sleep. So yeah, Yin, which you guys are using right now, is my best-selling oil. And that's
Product
all
plug.
around like
so good.
calming the nervous system. And it's really great for stress and it's really great for sleep. And so it was funny. It's like when you kind of, I guess, you know, how many businesses start, like once you kind of get a little idea and then it kind of all just comes through. It kind of all just fell into place and the right people came through at the right time. So it actually started, I wanted to start with incense. And then once I started to develop the concept, I realized I may as well, if I'm going to do incense and develop the aromatherapy and the scents for the incense, I may as well have diffuser blends and mists and a few other options as well, because I feel like there's people that are like, you know, in all different camps, and your incense person might not necessarily use essential oils and vice versa. So yeah, I met a botanical aromatherapist. He was one of my yoga students and he just like came into my orbit at the right time. So yeah, we still work together. I'm actually going to go see him after this because he lives in St Kilda, which is really nice.
Who is it? Do I know him?
No, I don't think you would.
Cool.
His name's George. Hey, George.
Hey, George. Shout out to George.
He's a legend. And so, yeah, him and I have worked really closely together on creating the scents, and still to this day I do it all. And at times I've been like, I'm going to get the products made. And I think eventually I will get the products made. But as much as it's hard to juggle all the things, I really like that I only batch the products when I'm in like a good frame of mind with like good music playing, with like good intention going into it. And that it's all like, you know, it's my heart and soul that goes into that. And I feel like that's what I put out into the universe.
And do you do that in your home or with George?
In my home.
So you literally like you poured it into this bottle.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's like wow.
And labeled it and got the labels printed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Thanks, babe. And up until recently, I do tea, incense, and oils. And then this year, part of, I guess, wanting to grow the business was like, I can't continue to do all the things by myself. And so I'm most passionate about the scent. So I've kind of pared back the incense and pared back the tea, and are just for the time being focusing on the scent. And I feel like that's really nice. And I've got a few new things that are coming out. And then, yeah, it just really lends itself to like the services that I offer, and just really, I guess, helping people have some tools that they can slow down with.
No wonder Christmas is keeping you so busy though.
Yeah. But you mentioned that you are the kind of person who's always been pretty good with boundaries and things. How do you navigate that from a business perspective when things are so busy, if at all?
I feel like actually it's probably the one area that I struggle with boundaries with the most. It's really hard. Like I still kind of don't know what the right balance is. And I think when your work is like a creative outlet, like it's also like I'm not the kind of person that can just be like, this is my diary. It's like duplicate and repeat each week. Like I wish I was one of those people.
Same.
Oh, gosh, it'd be so much easier.
Yeah.
But I'm very much like, you know, I'll think some days like, okay, I'm doing batching all day. And then I'll be like really in the zone with like content or like copy and social media. So then I'll like switch it around. I feel like slowly but surely I'm getting into a better pattern with things. But I don't know. I feel like when you first start a business, there's a lot of like legwork that goes into getting it to a certain point. And I know it's like not a miraculous like a miraculous switch that's going to go off one day. But I do feel like I'm edging closer and closer to like having my weekends free apart from like events and markets.
Yeah.
Whereas once upon a time, and actually when I was working for somebody else, that just meant that like inner states actually had to fit in wherever I could.
Yeah.
But I feel like this year it has mostly been during the week, which is
Great.
really nice. So
for anyone out there who is wanting to start a product-based business or, I don't know, even take the leap towards working for themselves in some capacity, what would be your one piece of advice?
Just to listen to your intuition. Like, I think the thing is that holds people back is maybe that you always feel like there's somebody else that could be doing it better than you that has more experience, more money, more, you know, a better set of skills to be doing the thing. And it's just not the case. If you really want the thing, you can go after the thing. And I just think listen to your gut. Like if you've got a good idea and you want to birth it into the world, just start like sharing it with people who are going to support you and learning that also sometimes people will give you bad advice. But if it's not your customer and not somebody who would be buying that product, maybe don't listen to them because I think, you know, at the start when I first started doing incense wasn't that big 4 years ago. Like it's obviously had a really big resurgence, but it was people were like, incense, that's weird. And my incense was all natural. So it was quite different to all the incenses that are out there. But I learned, and even actually scent is such a personal thing. So I remember the first market that I did, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's actually really kind of challenging to watch people experience your scent. And some people are like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And then they'd like pass it to their friend and they'd say the same thing. And I think that a few things with that, like we're also desensitized to aromatherapy and natural products because we're bombarded with like perfume and chemicals. And so you think things should smell a certain way, but a natural ingredient smell a lot differently. And especially if we're thinking about like highly concentrated, like diffuser blends. So what I've given you is in jojoba oil. So it's diluted. But if you just smell that in oil straight out of the bottle without any dilution, it can be like quite intense.
Really intense, yeah.
And so I think, the beautiful thing about scent is it's really personal. So some people will like it, some people won't, and that's fine. So I think, if you want to launch something, like listen to people that you really trust and like bounce ideas off people to help bolster your confidence, and just go after it. Like there'll always be somebody who's smarter, better, you know, all the things than you are. But if you really want it, you can do what you want with it.
I listened to this really good podcast. I think it must have been on the Diary of a CEO. Maybe we'll link it in the show notes. I try to find it. I think it was with the founder of Netflix. And he talks about, you know, if you have an idea or a business idea, don't think about getting good at starting a business. Think about getting good at testing ideas. Yeah. And so you can save yourself so much time and money and trouble and emotional reactions by actually just putting your idea to the test immediately and as quickly and as cheaply as possible, you know. And anyway, for anyone out there who's listening to this thinking, oh, fuck, I do really want to, you know, start my own thing or whatnot, I will try to find the link to that episode because I was like, wow, I wish I had listened to this like 10 years ago. I would have saved myself a lot of time and cash.
I know, it's so true. Yeah. And I think like the thing is when you have a business, it can definitely like evolve. And so how your business starts isn't necessarily how it will end. And I feel like over the last 4 years, I've tried a lot of different things. Like at one point I tried a range which was perfume and aromatherapy based because at the start I was like, no, I want to be really purist and I want to be all natural. And then I was like, hang on, if I'm like perfectly honest with myself, like I use shampoo and conditioner that's got like fragrance in it. Like I definitely use skincare that's got fragrance in it and it's not like top of mind for everyone. So I developed this extra range and it was beautiful. But what I found is at markets and stuff and like when I'm talking about it, I'm just not as passionate about that. So even though it did quite well towards the end of, about 3 or 4 months ago, I decided to not continue on with that. And I feel like that was like a really good learning and it was fine. And not everything has to be forever. So it wasn't like detrimental to the business to do that. It was just like, okay. And this year for me has been all about kind of like letting some stuff go that's been really challenging. Like the incense I loved and it was so popular, but I didn't really, it was really time consuming and quite expensive, and all my costs had really gone up to keep it natural. And so it got to the point where I was like, this isn't really commercially viable for me at this point with the amount of time that I have if I want to keep making everything. And so I made the decision to let that go. And it's kind of that has given me time then to batch and to get on top of things and to have stuff in stock more regularly. So I feel like it's just trial and error. Yeah. And then, you know, in 2 years or 3 years time, if I got to a point where it had grown and I could bring the incense back, 100% would. But I think that it's like, okay, that's not working right now. If I want to keep making everything by myself, I need to let that go and know if it's meant to come back, it'll unfold that way.
Yeah. I know that Josh is also helpful sometimes in getting behind the market stall and giving his best sales pitch and helping you to batch the product and things, which I guess causes me to reflect back on another big part of your story, which is your relationship and, you know, the potential of a family.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I think because I always have been so career driven, I guess I got to like my early 30s and like we just hadn't really thought about having kids. Like I was on a trajectory to be like, you know, have the career that I wanted to and earn good money and to like do it all. And we got married and we were so happy. And I feel like much like you and Guy, we've always had a great relationship and we've actually just loved spending time together. So then there's two parts to this story and then it got to the point though, I guess, where I was having some issues. And since I was 14, I'd always had signs of endometriosis, but it had always gone undiagnosed. And like over the years of my adult life, it had kind of like flare up and then it would like die back down. And that's probably one of the reasons actually, like the other reason I was drawn to like living a healthy life and being a yoga teacher because I always was looking for things to like make me feel the best that I could, because every month it was this thing that would like bubble back up to the surface. But it had never been diagnosed. So I think it was in my early 30s that I finally went to the doctors and she was like, oh, do you know that there's like also a test, like you're getting to your 30s now or you're in your early 30s, there's a test that you can do for your ovarian reserve. Like we'd suggest having that done. And so I was like, no worries, but we're like really not thinking about kids. So I'll get that done. And it came back and it was very low for how it should have been.
Is that like your AMH levels?
AMH. Yeah. But there's a lot of other factors that go into that. Sure. And I remember at the time I was quite stressed with work. I think it was not long after we'd lost Josh's dad. So we were just like not into that. And the doctor actually suggested, like, have you ever thought about having your eggs frozen? And we did have the conversation and we kind of like, we're like, do you know what? No, if we're meant to have kids, we will have kids. And so, you know, transport a few years into when I was in my mid-30s. And I guess with COVID and losing Pat, so just before we lost Pat, I guess just spending a bit more time at home, it had finally got to the point where I was like, okay, we are in our mid-30s now. Maybe this is the time that we do want to start having kids. So we started trying and just nothing. And then, you know, a year had passed and we just weren't having any luck. So we decided to go and have some more testing done. And then we ended up in the IVF world. And I think it's so funny. Like IVF is something that is spoken about so much. And it's something that I just had such rose-colored glasses on about until that point. Like, you know, on a hand, you're like, eat healthy, exercise, do yoga, do all the things. Like mid-30s, I'll be fine. And I knew that I'd had that like looming test and I'd always had some endo issues. But I guess I was just a bit naive to the fact that like IVF was maybe the silver bullet that like if it wasn't happening and I had IVF, it would happen. So we met with a doctor and we decided that we would do a few rounds or we'd start with ovulation induction. And for those people that don't know, it's such a new world, like when you go down that path. But I was in the category of like unidentified, like unexplainable infertility.
Yep.
And at that point, looking back, my doctor should have said to me to have a laparoscopy because I had all of the telltale symptoms of endo, but they kind of They didn't really do that. They just said you could if you wanted to, but it would delay having IVF. So our suggestion would be to just try IVF and see how you go.
Yeah.
And so we did about just after Pat passed, we started, so he passed in the October, and then the year after, I feel like we started in the April or the May. And then that year we did 5 rounds of ovulation induction, which is like a cycle where they stimulate you with hormones and they check your follicles, but you just have sex. You don't actually go in to have the sperm put in you.
And sorry, it's called ovulation induction.
Yeah. So it's like where they track your ovulation cycle. So they can work out when you're ovulating, and then they also give you some drugs to help boost. I actually can't remember now, but I'm pretty sure that they track your ovulation and they give you a little helping hand along the way, but then it's up to you just as a couple to have sex, and hopefully that will lead to a pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so we did that for, roughly 6 months and nothing, and it was becoming a bit stressful. And so then they were like, okay, if it's not happening now, we probably suggest the next best thing would be starting IVF. So we were like, okay, cool.
And how old are you at this point?
I was 35.
Okay.
Yeah, 35. Yeah, about 34 or 35. And so they're like, you are getting to that age where it is important that if you want to have kids, like we act now. My issue was, so then I'll say this first. So we started IVF, and the first round I had 4 follicles, which were at the size that we could have gone through to have an egg retrieval. But because it was my first round, that's actually still like a really, really low number.
Right.
So they suggested to us to wait and to like see how we went for the next round. And then it just got worse from there. So
And are you having to pay that money every time you do another round? Because it's such an expensive process, isn't it?
Yeah, it is an expensive process. So we were having to pay, but we were getting a big rebate.
Oh, because of the unexplained infertility?
No, because I wasn't actually going through to like where I had to be in the hospital and have the egg retrieval. They were able to kind of like put that money towards the next round.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's really interesting because I feel like once you're in the hamster wheel, those doctors, they just want to get you onto the next round. So at no point was there any discussion of like, hey, maybe we just need to take a step back and like work out what's going on. So I think I did 3 rounds quite close together, but I was still really grieving Pat, and I was like juggling work and, opening a new business. And
was that 3 rounds of full IVF?
3 rounds of full IVF.
And that's like where you do the injections for the hormones.
You do the monthly injections, they monitor you, but every time I'd go in to have like a scan, I wouldn't have enough follicles to go through to have an egg retrieval. So I'd have to abort, and then I'd have my period and have to wait till the next round.
That's so much for your body.
Yeah. And I was just a bit of a shell of a human. So I feel like, Josh and I were just both like, oh my gosh, like we didn't know how hard this would be mentally. We didn't know at the time it was still like COVID regulation. So he couldn't come on any of the appointments with me. He couldn't come into the doctors with me when I was going for my scans. And it was just really, really challenging. And so at that point, we weren't really happy with our doctor, who was one of the most highly recommended doctors in Melbourne. And I think that there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes it just doesn't work out because it doesn't work out. And I think the COVID thing was very challenging for everyone at the time. So we kind of got to that point and decided that we needed a little pause and a little break. And through all of that, I'd been working with a naturopath, I'd been working with an acupuncturist, and, you just get so used to people saying to you, just stop thinking about it and it'll happen. Or
don't be so stressed.
Don't be so stressed.
Yeah.
Go on a holiday, or have you tried acupuncture? And I'm like, I've been doing acupuncture for like 10 years. Like, it's, we had all those things. And the most helpful people within that whole journey were definitely my naturopath and my acupuncturist. And my naturopath would like go through my bloods with a fine tooth comb and explain things and give me supplements. And she was an absolute angel. And so was my acupuncturist. And I think if it had not have been for those 2 people, I would have been like 10 times worse than what I was. So we decided to have a little bit of a pause and to find a different doctor. And so we did find a different doctor, but then that was really challenging because you have to go through all of the forms, all of the initial consultations again. And this new doctor was really, really thorough. She was really great. And at that point, I was really lucky because you have so many emotions because like Josh is also the kind of guy that everyone's like, king of the kids, he'll make the best dad. When are you having babies? Like he's going to be the greatest dad. And I'm just like, I don't even know whether I can have babies. Like this is where we're at. But you kind of like, you know, trying to deal with that, saying it but not saying it in so many words. And so at that point, I feel like I had a few really beautiful friends who were like, hey, you know that we'd be an egg donor for you if you really wanted to. So that was really.
Had Josh had testing and
he'd had all the testing
and he was all good?
Was totally
Okay,
fine.
sure.
Yep. And so, yeah, it was definitely all my side, which makes you just, you know, makes you really question, like, as a woman, what's wrong with you and like your femininity and all of those things. And so, especially while you've got the world telling you that your husband will be the greatest dad in the world. You're like, this is awkward. And so then, you know, we went through stages where I was like, maybe we just shouldn't be together because I can't give you what you want and all of these things. So we took a little bit of a pause and started with this new doctor, but she was really, really diligent in like really kind of framing like really kind of, I guess, giving us the full picture of like our chances and what that would mean. And I guess for me at that point, we both knew we were like at the end, we couldn't, we'd been almost 2 years and we couldn't kind of keep going. So we always said we'd do one more round with her. And then, I don't know, it just felt like every time that I got my period, something else would happen and it felt like nothing was in flow. Like everything was like we'd hit a brick wall at every obstacle. And so we decided to take like a bit of a proper pause and really think about like what it meant for us to be parents and like what it meant for us to have kids and whether we wanted to like, have somebody else's egg or whether we wanted to have our own. And Josh was great. He was really like, I don't actually want to have anybody else's baby if it's not ours, like if it's not mine and yours, like that's important to me. Like, and it's not that there's anything wrong with that. It was just that he was like, I don't really want kids enough to want somebody else's. And I remember early on in the piece, like one of my beautiful photographers that I work with, she had gone through IVF and ended up having twins. And she made the comment to me that she was like, oh, good luck. It's so harrowing and it's really hard, isolating journey. And she's like, I would have literally chopped off a leg to have babies though. And I remember just thinking, oh, I don't feel like that. Maybe there's something wrong with me because I do want to have babies, but I don't probably want them enough to like abandon everything else. Like I want to have them. And I think we all have, you know, our tolerance level or what we know would be our limit. And I think for Josh and I, we knew that we were pushing up against our limit. And I think because I am somebody who's very much like about flow and like listening to signs and your intuition, at that point, my soul just was telling me that with how grief-stricken I was, how shot out my nervous system was, I just knew that I actually wasn't going to fall pregnant with 1, 2, 3 rounds of IVF. Like I knew that I needed to kind of just like take my foot off the brake and step away. And so then I started to really do some research into why we have babies and like why it's important for people to have children and did a whole lot of reading and listened to some really good podcasts. And I came across a podcast that's called Women Without Children. And it spoke a lot about how we live in a pro-natalist society. And like, you know, from a really young age as women, we're really, really geared towards having babies. Like it's like, you know, we're given dolls and we're taught to nurture and to look after people and that one day you'll grow up and you'll have a family of your own. And, you know, I had always wanted that, but like one of the, if I thought about the reasons that I wanted that, it was of course to have a family, but it was like, maybe I'll always regret it if I don't, or like who will look after us when we're old? Like we're going to be like old and lonely. And also just this idea, I think I had like a really funny idea of what it meant to be like a woman without a child. And for me, that was kind of always like the spinster, like the hardened woman that was like not soft or nurturing or motherly. It was like somebody who was kind of like on the outer. And so I kind of just like really did a lot of like deep delving into like, okay, why do we want kids? How will our life look if we have kids? How will it look if we don't have kids? So many conversations with Josh and I around like what was important to us, what would we want our life to look like if we did have kids? And then if we don't have kids, how do we want it to look? And in the end, we never ended up going back and having another round of IVF. And it was partially because I think we both knew that we just didn't have it in us. And also because it felt like we were just fighting against a losing battle. And so that was at the end of 2022. And I feel like there was a real grief period after that. And it was really interesting telling people that that was what we decided to do. And our beautiful families were so accepting, like was so lucky. Josh's mum and my parents were just like, that's fine. Like they kind of had seen how hard it had been for us. You'll have a great life regardless, and you can be aunties and uncles and nurture all your friends' kids and, just still really live a beautiful life and a fulfilling life. So that was really beautiful. And so I kind of ended that year and was like, all right, next year I'm going to get back. Because I feel like IVF, can we just take a moment for the fact it robs you of so much stuff? Like you put on so much, like I put on weight through all the hormones. You don't feel balanced. You don't feel like yourself. And I think the one thing that journey taught me was with doctors, like you always need to advocate for yourself because I think we were really naive when we went into that. And looking back now, I would probably do things so differently, but I don't have any regrets. Like it's part of our story and it's all worked out fine, but it was a really, really challenging time. And, people that have egg freezing even, that is so, so hard. It's like, it's funny, like as soon as you have those baby making hormones at optimum levels to be making babies, your brain gets so fixated on that. And it's like, it does something to your brain chemistry. And it's like, you go, to a different place when you're on those hormones. So for anyone who's going through IVF or been through IVF or egg freezing, my heart just goes out to you because it's just, it's a really challenging and isolating time. And so once we'd finished that, I really just wanted to kind of like get back to being me and get back to being myself. And so in 2023, I think it was like the 3rd of Jan, I always went to the gym and stuff, but there's so many things that you can't do with IVF. And one of them's like, don't run, don't do intense exercise because it can be bad for your cortisol. So it was like very much on the yoga bandwagon, which was totally fine with me. But going into 2023, I was like, do you know what? I actually really want to go back to going like hard at the gym. And I hadn't done a proper gym workout for probably like 2+ years. And Josh and I decided to go to a Body Fit workout together. And I just had the most intense, excruciating stomach cramps. And I'd had that quite a lot when I'd have my period or when I'd be ovulating. But it was within like the first 20 minutes of a workout that I was like almost curling over and vomiting because I couldn't move. So Josh knew that had happened to me a few times, like when I used to be fit, like there would be certain points in my cycle that I'd have like exercise induced cramps, which is an endometriosis symptom, which I didn't really know about until I got diagnosed.
Wow.
So at the start of 2023, that happened and I was like, okay, I probably need to go to the doctor and get to the bottom of this. So that was kind of the start of me going, okay, I'm sick of having this endo thing pushed to the side. I really want to have the surgery and get to the bottom of this. So I decided to go ahead and have a laparoscopy, which I had in 2023. And in that 6 months, I even had like really bad debilitating lower back pain, like all the symptoms on paper, and had, stage 3, quite bad endometriosis where it was removed from 9 areas of my body.
Wow.
And
gosh,
then,
women have got to go
it's
through
like, how
so
good is it
much.
being a woman?
Perfect.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. So that was just like, it was finally like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Like all these years I felt like something was wrong with me. And it was just like all the times that I'd been at that point where I'd had doctors say there's nothing wrong with you, like your scan's clear. And the last one I'd had of those was when I'd gone and had my tubes flushed for IVF. And the doctor said to me, well, I can just tell you now that you don't have endometriosis because it would show up here. So get it out of your head, push that aside because that's not helping anyone for you to think that.
What the fuck?
Oh my God.
How do doctors speak to people like
even
that?
say that? Isn't it just crazy? So it just felt so liberating to finally know that like all those years of horrendous pain and like having days off work and not feeling like yourself and not being able to exercise, that like, okay, there was something genuinely wrong with me that entire time. So I spent like most of 2023 kind of recovering from endo then. And I had the surgery and then I had to do 6 months of injections to kind of like stabilize my hormones to try and reduce endo, which was in areas that they couldn't operate on.
Oh, wow.
And so, that was kind of like the end of it. But a lot of people were like, oh my God, are you really angry about the IVF? And I just kind of think life has a weird way of like, working out how it's meant to. And I definitely haven't been angry about it, but I think it's just such a good thing to be aware of. Like if you feel like something's not right, like even if you have to push with your doctor, like push to get the thing, if your doctor's not giving you the answers that you want, go to somebody else because I probably should have had that surgery like in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And it probably not that it would have changed the outcome of us having children necessarily, but it would have saved me a lot of years of being in pain on and off with endo. And like now, the last year, it has been a year of like just having normal cycles. Like I've never had a normal cycle. It's like, this is just game changing. Like to think that this is how people live their whole life. Like it's been incredible. So,
Wow.
and I saw that the statistics actually, like I follow a really beautiful endo specialist on Instagram. And just before I came in this morning, she was talking about endometriosis awareness. And so 1 in 7 women have endometriosis, but for fertility, 1 out of 2 people that present with fertility issues will have endometriosis.
Wow.
So half.
So it's just like knowing that, like I'm like, oh my gosh, of course I should have been pushed to, have a laparoscopy to do the inquiry before I ever had the IVF. But it just wasn't the way that it kind of panned out. And if I had have had a different doctor, maybe it would have, maybe not. But yeah, I think it's just been such a learning for me in getting to know myself and once again, kind of just like not being afraid to do something that's different to everyone else. Cause, Josh and I are really lucky that we have each other and we've got really amazing friends. But I guess when you don't have kids, you're kind of like on the outer in some ways. And we do have a lot of friends that don't have kids, but sometimes it's challenging, but it's fine. Sometimes it's great. Like when you're sitting on the couch, like all alone on a Saturday night, able to like live the life that you want to do your own thing. It's great. And I think that, when we were doing our research about like, should we, shouldn't we, do we go another round? Do we go down the rabbit hole fully again? One of the things that I heard that really resonated with me, and I had a few friends who've got kids say it as well, like regardless of whether you do or you don't, you'll always have moments where you want the other thing. Like, and I think that we always think with like not having kids that the regret will be stronger if you don't, but it's not necessarily true. Like I have beautiful friends who are the most amazing, loving women and mothers that have moments who probably think, oh, I wish I didn't have kids. It would be so much easier.
Yeah.
And, it's fine to oscillate between, having those moments where you're like, oh, I've got this. I'm living my best child-free life to being like, sometimes in winter it's like a bit lonely and I wish I had kids' sports to go to on the weekends. Like, and that's fine. That's just life. It's like, you can't always have things one way all the time. It's like the dance of the mind and the dance of the heart is, always there. And I guess I feel like you just try and show up and mother and nurture for me in other ways. Like I pour that energy into other things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest causes of human suffering is black and white thinking, like the belief that things either have to be this or that once you subscribe to one, that has to be the camp that you always sit in. But like a really, and I say this to my clients all the time, like a key marker of psychological well-being is our capacity to be in the grey area and actually oscillate between the black and the white, and to find a sense of okayness with that oscillation, and acknowledging, the classic like grass is always greener, and that there are always going to be, actually Loretta, who was came on the retreat to Sri Lanka, said that every yes also means no.
Yeah.
And every no also means yes. So whenever you say yes to doing one thing, you're by default saying no to doing another thing. And so the decision to wait, does that actually make sense in this context?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, I just had to sense check myself. But yeah, I love that perspective that you have around kind of acknowledging that regret exists as a part of life, and it will show up on your doorstep sometimes when you expect it, sometimes when you don't, and that actually that's just okay.
Yeah, 100%. And I just feel like it also took me a little while to like own the fact after the IVF journey that we had then decided that this was okay. Because I know it's really hard for people who don't have a successful IVF journey. And some people, it takes them a really long time to come through that and to make, I guess, peace with the outcome of them being child free. So for us to kind of like go through that and like be so in the trenches with it and so grief stricken, but then like kind of come out the other side and to go, this is okay. Like, yeah, part of me was like when people would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I feel so sorry for you. You feel like a bit bad being like, I'm all right now. I'm going to be okay. And so now I feel like I can finally speak up and be like, we are child free. Like, I still have people say, I pray that you'll have a baby. It'll come through. And I'm like, you don't need to. It's okay. Like we're okay with this and you can be okay with it too, because people just don't know what to say, and they think that that's the thing that most people do. So, they really want that for everyone, which is so beautiful. But, we're kind of trying to live our best child-free life, and all the ups and downs that come with that. Still learning.
Oh, I've literally just been sitting here absorbing just in such a short space of time, really, from your early to mid-20s to where you're at now, in just the things that you've had to endure and experience, but to just have that, just such a light and beautiful response to life, and to be able to think with the perspective that you do is so refreshing. And I mean, I know I've personally, as a woman in my mid-30s, different circumstances, I'm not in a relationship with anyone, but that pressure of, the conversation about children and
it's still so real.
It's different context, but it's just such a pressure and such a conversation point. And so I just so appreciate you just sharing, you've just given so much and so many golden nuggets as well.
Oh, you're so well.
And validated many people's experience.
Yeah. And I think like Megzy, what you were just saying though, like from my experience as being the other, I think it really makes me try and think about like the people that are maybe not in that like core like group of like majority. Like there's always people that are on the outer, and single people are in that as well, because we're so driven by society to like honor marriages and couples. And me and my girlfriends are turning 40 next year, and there's a few of us in my group that still haven't met a partner. And sometimes I really need to just check in with them and be like, how are you? How is it? Like, how are you doing? Because it's hard. It's really challenging if you're on the outer. And not all the time, but it's nice to just know that you have that capacity to hold those people and to check in with them.
Yeah. And you're such an empathetic person. I just feel like that perspective and that level of compassion and empathy just really summarizes who you are as a human being.
Oh, thank you. I feel like it doesn't cost anything to be kind and to be caring. So it's important.
Well, thank you so much, Luce, for being here with us and sharing so much. I know, like I said, I've taken so much away, so I know so many people listening will have as well. And so just appreciate your openness, your vulnerability, your willingness to share. It's been so refreshing, and I'm leaving this conversation feeling like a better person
gosh, that's
for
so
having had
kind.
it. No, truthfully, you're like,
Same.
I've been literally like I've to the point that like my face has been away from the microphone and Amy's like speak like she's giving me signals like into the microphone.
I can't see Amy. I forget that she can make hand signals with you guys.
But to round out, we do like to ask and pose the question. And I know we're in that silly season period and your gorgeous products are probably just flying off the shelves at the moment. So we know that that's what's keeping you rushing at the moment is the Christmas period. But what is it that's helping you to slow down?
So the thing that is helping me slow down at the moment is gardening. It's such a random thing, but we just bought a house, like I said before. And so, yeah, for the last few weekends, we have just been like enjoying being out in the dirt, digging around and pulling things out and, yeah, planning it all out. And, yeah, I am a bit of an introvert at heart. So I feel like at this time of the year, anything that is grounding. So I really try and just like cooking, gardening, doing things with my hands. Actually, batching has really batching up product has been something that's helped me slow down at the moment because I know that my business is not going to work if I don't do it. And I have to be really present. And like I said before, I really have to be in a certain state of mind in order to do that. So I think work with my hands, like things at home that feel good and keep me grounded is what I'm leaning into at the moment.
Are you gardening herbs or like flowers or trees? Like what's the gardening sitch?
All of the things. Actually, I feel like Zoe, I've been like, can you send me some photos of your backyard? Because we're trying to do like a little fire pit situation.
Ooh, ooh la la.
When we moved into our backyard, it's not huge, but it's quite nice. And our house has mostly been done, but the garden was a little bit overgrown. Not overgrown. It's a bit more bushy than what we'd like. So we've pulled out a lot of trees and bushes. And we also had a real like 90s jungle gym in the back corner of the house that we moved into. So we've just given that away and that was so satisfying. We gave it away on Marketplace and then the people sent us a photo of it all set up and ready to go for their kids. So that was really nice. And so we've at the moment been really focused on like kind of like stripping it all back. And then, yeah, we're going to redo all the garden beds and I want to make it like a beautiful native garden which attracts the bees. So yeah, like a flower-filled garden that is good for like wildlife, bees and birds.
It's how funny is it when we get I live in an apartment, so I'm like I actually can't wait till the point that I have gardening to look forward to.
It's so nice. And so I do have a little like a beautiful in other houses that we've lived in, we've had like really gorgeous herb gardens and veggie gardens. But this time I actually just really want to get our backyard like looking really nice. And we do have one little area which is like a really nice little flower bed, which I've just pulled it all up and mulched and stuff. And actually this weekend I'm going to put a whole heap of herbs and salad greens and stuff like that in there. So
Can I just say though, because I remember pre having a bit of a garden of our own, I was the same. I was like, I just want to have my garden and like grow vegetables and all these things. And so when we bought our place, we had these 3 big, would you have seen these garden beds? We had like 3 big garden beds, like probably like 2 by 1 meter, like big garden beds, 3 of them. Anyway, so I was like so excited to like plant my veggie garden, which I did. And then it got to the point where I lost motivation and interest.
It's so much work.
It is so much work. Everything just grew out to the point where I grew these edamame plants and they take a while. I think I was like attending to them for like months and months and months. And then they started to fruit or flower or whatever it's called. So I had these 2 big plants with like hundreds of edamame beans on them. And I was like, oh yeah, I better go and pick those. I better go and like harvest those. And then I just didn't because I got too busy and the whole thing, they all went yellow and spoiled. And I was like, I have been attending to these plants for like 6 months and they just literally withered away. And it was at that point that I realized, I like the idea of being a green thumb, but I'm actually not.
Not yet.
No, so not anymore
because we home a lot to be a good gardener.
And also, and those big garden beds, like there was too many vegetables for what Guy and I could actually get through. So there was also a lot of wastage. Anyway, so what we ended up doing was actually redoing our back garden, pulling out all of the garden beds, and now we have a fire pit.
Yeah, can't wait to come hang around the fire pit.
This is more me.
Summer hangs.
This is more me. Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
Let's all do
100%.
Ninch hangs.
Okay, totally. So I mean, I think it would be really nice for people to know where they can find you, because not only do you have a product-based business but also services. You run incredible retreats. So do you want to just kind of give that a little bit of airtime?
Yeah. So my retreats are both here and overseas. Next year I've got 2 planned, one here and one in Bali. And yeah, I really like to think of yoga as an accessible tool which can help people to connect a little deeper. And, it's not about the shape of your body, it's about the shape of your mind, and it's about having tools in your toolkit to lean on, because life doesn't always go to plan. And I just, really think it's so beautiful to watch people come together on retreat. And it's just, honestly, I know it's a big investment. I don't take this I never ever take it with a grain of salt to think that people invest in a retreat, because I understand that it's your hard-earned money, and it's it's a significant amount of money that people are parting with. But honestly, the difference, too, Zoe,
Preach.
it's just, oh my gosh. And not just the difference that week, the follow-on effect from people doing a retreat is incredible.
Yeah.
I know Zoe and I are the Monday Night Bandits, and I know last night you were having a little chit chat with some of your retreat guests, and it's a few weeks since you've been back, and they're just still all of the things that they did and that they learned, it has such a flow on effect into your life. And sometimes with yoga, I do have students say to me I'm learning the practice on the mat, but how can I take that into my life off the mat? And I'm just slowly but surely, start to integrate the tools. But I think a retreat is a really good way to level up.
Fast track.
Yeah.
I reckon there was 8 or 9 of the retreat crew at the studio last night. It was so nice. But also I was getting a coffee at this new little cafe that's open in Point Leo, and I saw that there was a little stall outside of this, it used to be an old kind of rugged general store that's now been done up. And one of my students who came on my Sri Lanka retreat last year has decided off the back of that retreat that gave her the confidence to start her business, which is all around hand-picked flowers and florals from her garden. And it was her stall. And I was like, for someone to be able to have a really solid week of time where not only are they leaning into practices like yoga, which honestly transform the way that we relate to ourselves and the world and our minds, but also to have time and space to actually gain the confidence to do the thinking, to actually launch the thing, to get that thing off the ground, or to, listen to your intuition as well, right?
100%.
It's easy to say, everyone listen to your intuition, but it's when we're so fucking busy,
it doesn't even, you can't hear it. Yeah, it's silent.
I'm booking a retreat immediately after this conversation. I need it.
Go to Lucy's because they're really good.
It's so, and I think that that's the thing. I've had writers and all different types of people come, scientists. You don't have to be have your own business or be in the wellness space to benefit from a retreat. You could be mums. The level of decision fatigue that people have.
Yeah,
get to come away and just show up, and the decisions are made. You have space to journal. You have space to think. It's honestly the biggest gift that you could give
the
yourself.
hardest part of coming home from a retreat is recognizing that you then have to cook and plan your own meals, and you're so deflating. Yeah. Anyway, okay, we could keep going, and I feel like we should also do another episode on yoga, which we've sort of spoken about doing that at some point. So maybe we can get you back in and talk all things yoga. Little tasters. But anyway,
totally.
Again,
thank
Luce,
you so much for having me.
Yeah,
it's been lovely to chat.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy life to be here with us. I know that our listeners are going to be so grateful to have heard your story. And
you're so welcome.
Where can we find you? We didn't get to that point.
Oh, yeah, true.
I've actually just redone my website, so that is very exciting. Innerstates.com.au or on Insta at inner.states. So
beautiful. Thank you,
Lucy.
Right.
Thanks, Luce. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If any of the topics we've covered today feel overwhelming, we recommend seeking individual support. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please contact Lifeline on 131114 or 13 Yarn on 139276.